talking about Relic, which is from 2020, so soon. Director and writer was Natalie Erica James, and this is her debut film, which is phenomenal. Great work for fresh out the gate there in creating something like this. So it is about a daughter, mother, and grandmother are haunted by a manifestation of dementia that consumes their family home. And yeah, it does do that. I liked the intergenerational elements to it, and that, you know, it was showing kind of the effects of this family, and that's something I appreciated. It follows these three women as they're dealing with a deteriorating mind. So we have Edna, who's a woman who has dementia, her daughter Kay, and then Kay's daughter, Sam. So getting to see that, and also getting to see like our interpretation of how we manage our elders and the family members that we, you know, are tasked with taking care of in their old age. It's immediately pretty clear in this film that this is a family that's similar to Hereditary and that they do not communicate. They are, you know, pretty distant, and this is like a time where they're all being brought together, and their differences of opinions and experiences and the fact that they have been hiding things from each other kind of piles up. So Edna is missing at the beginning of this film, and so Kay and Sam come down to find her, and there's really no even real understanding of when she went missing because they don't communicate that often. And there's a part where Kay is questioned by the police about her mother, and it is, you know, she has to admit that she doesn't talk to her mother much, and despite an incident during Christmas where she had flooded the house from, you know, her kind of forgetting what was happening, she still isn't like, she didn't feel it was important or like that big of a deal. But also, like, when you do get to interact with Edna, it's obvious that she probably didn't make herself vulnerable or explain how severe some of the situations were. And when Kay and Sam get to the house, they see like sticky notes everywhere that are telling Edna like to do very basic tasks and to remember to do very basic tasks. And later those sticky notes get really alarming when they have basic information about Edna, just like what her name is, what color her mom's eyes are, like these memories that we take for granted. She has to have on sticky notes throughout the house. She has, you know, her hobbies. She has like these candles. She makes candles, are just kind of strewn about. And there's just like a lot of troubling things. Like, it's clear that, you know, she's just kind of been existing on her own and coping with a lot on her own, and then just wandered off. It's also apparent that Kay doesn't have a strong relationship with her own daughter, Sam, and that Sam kind of offhandedly mentions that she doesn't work where she did anymore at the museum, and now she works at like a bar, and she's not really sure what she wants to do with her life, and it's awkward and uncomfortable, and clear that they don't really have that kind of relationship. And Sam like calls her by her name instead of, you know, mom, and she often, you know, sides with her grandmother on, you know, the issues at hand and kind of backing her up and is in her corner more than her mom's corner. When Edna returns, it's as if, you know, nothing happened. Like, she is kind of playing it aloof, despite being covered in dirt and having been missing for so long, and bruises, alarming bruises. But we get this brief glimpse into who Edna was and who she is. Like, throughout most of the film, she's kind of this ghost in a way. She's also a little bit of a villain. Like, we don't really know to trust her, and she is a point of contention for a lot that's going on. So there's just one moment when she's back, she's in her slacks, and she's getting, you know, looked over by a medical professional, and she's, you know, being kind of flippant and offhanded, but she's also like spunky, and it's clear that she's been a very stern and prideful woman she makes like some snide remarks, and she's like dismissing the concerns of others, and it's clear that she's like always had this like headstrong kind of life, which reminds me so much of my own grandmother. When I was watching it, I was like, this is just like her, like, you know, you couldn't tell my grandmother, you know, to go like help her to move or to do any of that. Like, she'd be like, no, this is my house. So I definitely understand the hesitancy with Kay and not starting that argument and knowing that her mother is gonna be defiant in that anyway. And it's like in seeing that, like, it is a really nice moment to understand who Edna is, and it then influences and explains the rest of the interactions and makes the times when you see her as vulnerable and stressed, and as old as she is, you feel even more about it because you saw what she actually could have been if she, you know, wasn't suffering from dementia. And I think that was a really great move. And there's also conversations with Kay about sending her mom to her home because she can't, you know, do that for her, or can't give her the care that she needs or take care of her. And Sam makes this comment like, you know, isn't it supposed to be that your parents change your nappies and then you change theirs? Like, you're supposed to take care of your own and not send them away. And that's like one of the big kind of battles there. And even after, I think, Sam interacts with Edna after she kind of is a little bit aggressive and showing that, like, she is afraid and so lashing out, even still, she's like, I don't think she needs to go to a home. And I think those moments that it is more of a psychological horror, and that those moments are uncomfortable, but really believable and understandable for people who might have similar experiences. And then there is horror aspects to it in that the house itself represents Edna's mind, right? So there's constant like mold occurring, and there's like a window, this really nice beautiful window that they had taken from this like old house that used to be on the yard that belonged to Edna's ancestors, and it was one of her, like, her great grandfather or something had dementia as well, but died on his own, and they had like torn down that like shed or small like house, but they took that window because it was so elaborate and put it onto their now house. And that's like, you know, representing like you're inheriting this trait and this illness, and that's kind of where the mold is first seen, and like it's like that is like the infection that's spreading, and throughout you kind of see those pieces of like the black molds throughout the house to kind of show how it's dirtying and sullying like the comprehension and the understanding. But there's even kind of a bit of like a like haunted house scenes where Sam is lost in the now labyrinth of a house after seeing those notes that like, my name is Edna, my mother's eyes are green. Like, you are descending into the chaos that is Edna's mind because nothing in there is working correctly. Like, the halls that used to lead to this place don't lead to that anymore. And now we're going in circles, and now we're lost, and now things are becoming smaller and suffocating. And it's, you know, a physical representation of what Edna is experiencing when she's, like, hitting these walls of, like, not remembering or understanding where she is and what she's doing. Like, being consistently lost, and feeling afraid because of that, because it is, you feel helpless, and there's times Sam really did feel helpless and was panicked and calling out for her mother, right? And to think like that Edna to some degree probably was too, and that's why she was trying to recall what her mother looked like. And I really appreciated that part of the horror. It's totally towards the end, and it is really like, you're like, wait, what are we doing now? All of a sudden, it's this kind of film, because before that, it was really just like an uncomfortable family film, a bit of a drama, and now
like a little hint of ghosts, because there's like the shadows behind, but like it is not it goes very quickly into this very very haunted house situation that I remember I found jarring initially. I was like, what?
Yeah,
Someone needs
like,
to
why?
explain to me what's happening, because everything was like kind of okay like a minute ago. And I don't know if that's like specifically supposed to represent like that the decline can be very quick. But it was very jarring. It was like, it felt sudden. But I think if that is actually representative of that, like the decline can happen quick, then it's effective for sure in creating this like feeling of uneasiness and chaos.
Yeah, I think because it's like you don't really know what to expect. Because I do remember in that scene, like where Sam is like investigating and she turns and there's this long hallway and there's like a shadow that goes by, and I was like, I would go and look. Like if I'm just in my grandmother's house and I see that, I'd be like, what is that? I want to go see. And so
Nope.
my my instinct would be to just go and investigate. And then it turned into Alice in Wonderland, and I was like,
Yeah.
I just feel like I mean, I would keep going the way Sam was, and I probably would also be losing it in that, like, this is clearly not reality, and I don't have control of things, and where am I, and what's going on, and this is now surreal horror, you know? And so for that, I could see it, but while I was watching it, I was like, I'd just be like, okay, this is happening. I don't know why. I'm going to keep going. But it was really like, I had no idea. Like, when I was just like, yeah, I'll go investigate. Like, like Sam, I was just like, yeah, you just check out these boxes. I turn around because I'm done investigating. And I draw the line here. And now there's a wall there. I don't know.
I'd be like, there is a whole back house to the house that I know. Nope. I'd be like, I would recognize very early. I'd be like, this is the moment where my mind is playing tricks on me. We must go the opposite way. We must go out where we came. If there is a thing there, I am not going by myself to go look at it. We are getting everyone in the house to go look in this weird space, because otherwise it's not happening at all.
Yeah, we gotta go together.
I was very scared as like I remember being in my grandpa's house, and like his house was creepy and filled with like shadowy things and like creaky floors, and I'd be like, I would cover my head with the covers and we would pretend it wasn't real, or we would get an adult would help look for the thing. I don't know. I would not be in a horror movie because I would just be like, we're leaving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, we have to go through it. It's about, we have to get, it's an exercise in understanding and empathy.
Well, yes, I get that part. But if that was not...
But I don't want to do it.
Yes. It's like in horror games where it's like you have to keep going, and I'm like, no, in no situation ever do I want to keep going. I'm usually like, can we not go to the zombies? Like, is there another way?
No. We have to do it. We have to live it out. Yeah, I think... I think that part was very... I remember when I was watching it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like Rose Red. Like, if you had a string to, like, follow where you were going, you would turn around and the string would just be through the wall because...
Yeah.
Just like that scene in Rose Red, Mike said, I think Leaves of Grass, which is that, like, book that is, like, chaos, like, because the house keeps changing, and the book is, like, at sometimes the words are just, like, in a circle around the page, and you just kind of have to go. I think that's what it's called. But, yeah, so I was like, yeah, this is just madness. Now we're all in it. And we just gotta go. I think that imagery was really effective. And in my, like, looking through some of the articles, because I was like, what? A lot of people are appreciative of the representation of dementia and feel that it is an accurate representation, like a portrayal of what that experience is for caretakers, right?
Yeah.
To see the person you know becoming somebody else, and to become vulnerable. That moment with Edna where she was going to eat the photos, and then Kay coming and being like, don't do that, and the sheer panic of, like, trying to reconcile this woman who's in front of her who is simultaneously her mother and not her mother, right?
Yeah.
And that moment where she is, sad and is crying out, wondering where her family is and wanting to go home, and you can tell that is not part of Edna that Kay had ever interacted with, right? Like a woman who is sad and looking for support, you know, like she's always been the support. And yeah, to see her and for Kay to just be like, no, we're here. And that, you know, the other part is like a lot of reviews are like, it's not a great horror movie. Like there's some spooks, but that definitely takes like it's the secondary part of what this film is. Like it's just kind of also happening. But the primary focus is this representation. And I do think it promotes empathy and compassion towards an individual with dementia, in that you really get to see how alarming and stressful it is. I can't really tell you what the ending of the Skin, and I won't explain more than that, just to say I don't really know what that one's supposed to represent. So if you have an idea, please let me know, because I'm just like, I get like rebirth or something. I get them being on the bed. I get that, but I don't. That whole scene was like, why you gotta do that? Why we gotta do this?
Why we gotta remove skin now?
Yeah, it was definitely jarring, especially like those scenes. Kind of reminds me of like the exorcism of Deborah Logan or whatever. Just like that, those unsettling horror moments. Like when she's like stabbing herself, I was like, no. I was like, we're in horror world. I can't. Why are knives around? But I wanted, because so much of this is really just a representation of dementia, I wanted to, like, both Kat and I were like, we don't really have that knowledge. And so we wanted to get some firsthand knowledge of what people who are taking care of others who have dementia experience, what they've seen, and what is, like, some of the trends. And if there are similarities in this film, to see if it's accurately representing it. And so I actually talked to my mother, because my step-grandfather had dementia at the end of his life. And so she and my grandmother took care of him during his last years during that time. And so, you know, I wanted to see. So she shared with me some of the experiences, ways that they coped and dealt with some of the things and some of the more stressful aspects. And I did find some similarities, actually, in it. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting to see how, like, obviously, that Natalie, the writer and director of this, knew what they were talking about. I'm French, so we call my grandmother Mère, so that's what I'm going to call her. And we call my grandfather Papa, or Papa. So that's what they're going to call it. And my mom is just Mom. So that's fun. But, so my mom helped Mère help with Papa during these last years, and she said one of the common things that happened is that he would often forget where he was. So he spent the majority of his life up north in Massachusetts, which is where, like, my family is from, and had come down south to retire with Mère. And so there was a lot of times where he just really didn't remember that and would be lost and felt like he didn't belong in this place because it wasn't where he's always known. And she said he never really acknowledged that this was his, that this land belonged to him, and that this house was his own. He always kind of felt like an outsider, and that something was wrong in that. He would often ask where his wife was, and then he would see Mère and he would feel better because she was a constant in his life. So that was something, like, he would always be looking for her. There were times, she said, that he would feel panicked or kind of like he felt naked if he wasn't wearing his boots. Because he spends much of his life in his shoes. He was a very hardworking man, and he was, you know, always crafting and creating things as well, very hands-on, man's man in that way. And so if he wasn't putting on his shoes, then he felt like something was wrong, and that he was late for work or he needed to go somewhere. And so she said she spent many days lacing and unlacing his boots. No, even if he was just in the house, right? It's like, you're just putting on your boots, or we're walking, you know, around the yard. But that part was like a reminder and kind of an anchor to reality for him. Like, it was like state of normalcy so that it would bring him some calm because he would feel pretty stressed. She said that the hardest and saddest part of the entire experience were these moments where he would realize that something was wrong, where he would kind of come to and be himself and like snap out of it, and he would all of a sudden have this hard time communicating and would even find himself reciting numbers. Like it was just this thing that would, like, he would go to try to explain something and instead numbers would come out. You know, he'd be like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that would panic him because he knew that was wrong and that those aren't the words that he was trying to find. And so, you know, he would get frustrated and he would say, like, I know this isn't right. I know my brain isn't right. And hearing him kind of acknowledge that and be stressed by that was really heartbreaking for her, and obviously my grandmother as well. And that they were the hardest parts, just to see him kind of in that weakness and to the truth of knowing that he wasn't in control of his body anymore the way that he had been his entire life. And that, to me, is similar to Edna in that, you know, Kay, seeing her kind of call out and in that way acknowledge, like, something isn't right here after so long fighting, like, no, I'm fine, I'm going to live in my house, you can't be here, to the point where she says to Sam, like, I'm glad you're moving in. Like, that is a big leap, but is also one of the more sensitive parts of the film.
Yeah.
Something my mom really remembers is that Papa wasn't a terribly emotional or sentimental man. He's from a different time. He wasn't unkind. He just wasn't, like, overtly, like, loving, right? Like, he didn't say I love you. He didn't hug you in those ways. Like, but you knew that he cared. Like, it wasn't ever like he was rude. He was just from that time where you don't do that. Like, men don't do that. But during one of the times in which he, like, had come to, he was acknowledging the changes and his limitations, and so he wrote my mother a letter explaining how much, you know, she meant to him, and in ways that he wanted to continue to take care of her. Like, here are some things you need to do to make sure you're protected when I'm gone, kind of thing. And he couldn't write it. My grandmother wrote it for him, and he just recited it. But that, to my mom, was one of the more, like, impactful moments, because that was just out of character. Like, for him to be, like, that, you know, open and emotional about something like that. And she, like, just vividly remembers that. She said towards the end, he didn't eat much. There were weeks which they were like forcing him to eat even minimally. And it was, you know, just little. And that also happens in this film, where she's just not eating in case, like, you have to eat. And they just don't. And my mother said she feels like there's just something in the brain that just says, like, this is it. Like, just stop. We don't need to do that. We don't need to eat and drink. We're done. Which is really alarming and horror in its own right. He would also have trouble sleeping, which was really hard on my grandmother, because he would, you know, be pacing and constantly roaming around, and one that's just really annoying for Mimere, because she's like, I want to sleep, go to bed. But also it's, like, alarming because it's like, what is he doing up at night? Because we don't know what he's experiencing, like, what his reality is telling him to do. And there were, in fact, some scary instances where he broke a door or tried to break a door. He tried to break a window. Sometimes he would wander off, and one time he was missing for several hours. You know, he just was like, forget this, walked out the door. My grandmother didn't realize, and he was gone for like 4 hours, and an elderly neighbor found him in a pond, like chest level in this pond. Like, he had just waded into it, and like the neighbor had seen him, like, walking that way, and then hadn't seen him come back, and was like, what? And if they hadn't, you know, found him when they did, like, it was really terrifying. I would say that there were some troubling times where like he might get angry and frustrated and kind of act out in the way that Edna did. But like I mentioned, my mare doesn't really handle attitude that well. Is very much a strong-minded woman. And so if he ever got snippy or angry, she would just quickly be like, you're not talking to me like that in this house. Like, that is not happening. And he would, I think in those moments where she would do something like that and kind of snap back in the way that she is, it like was like, oh, that's my wife. Yes, sorry. Like, I apologize, ma'am. You know, like, it kind of brought him back to, like, oh, of course, my wife does not handle that. I don't know where I was doing, but I need to fix, like, check myself before she wrecks it. She will. Yeah. And I think that kind of having that interaction, like, not being like soft to it, like being like, oh no, like he's being angry, you know, it was a mix of like, I understand that you're frustrated, but also like we're gonna put some boundaries here, like you're gonna understand this. And that also was some normalcy for him to help my my mom would take Papa out. She said just to give him a break, she'd take him out to Dunkin' Donuts because we're from Massachusetts. We love Dunkin' Donuts. Or they go to McDonald's and get a hamburger with just ketchup because that's the way that he liked it. And they would also send my mare on vacations so that she could take a break because, like, that's a lot for her to handle as well. And she says there in those moments when he was a little more aware of things, in reality, he would often ask where his family was, and they would need to reassure him that they were there and that they were going to care for him and that they've been taking care of him, and that would put him at ease to be surrounded by familiar faces and to be reassured by people, even in those times when he wasn't entirely certain what was going on. Knowing that they were there was a source of comfort for him. And again, that's just like with Edna calling out for her family as well. My mom says that she believes he lived as long as he did because they were the ones taking care of him, like specifically his family, knowing that, you know, they were the ones who were putting on his boots because they knew how important that was to him, and that when it's someone you love who is struggling, that you can have more compassion, understanding, and patience to take care of them that perhaps like a facility or a nurse might not have. Like they might not have the knowledge or the patience and understanding that would be needed. And my family was lucky enough that they could take care of him in this way. My mare was already retired, and my mom's job allowed her to take time off when she needed to, and that's not always the case, because not everyone has that luxury, and it's totally understandable. And if, you know, you do need to have someone with more round-the-clock care, having them in a care facility is totally understandable. My mom was like acknowledging that. The part that she feels would be wrong is those folks who just kind of drop off their grandparents or parents into those homes and just kind of leave them there with this idea that like, oh, they're not all there anyway, how would they know? Because to her, she said, in those moments when he knew and was aware, wouldn't you want to be there? Like, wouldn't you want to assure him in those moments when everything is scary? And then imagine, like, now those little things that you hold on to and anchor for are not there either. And so it's like, why not risk it? Wouldn't you want to be in those times that he could see them and appreciate them and show his love, even in ways that he hadn't before? And she considered those moments like a blessing. And, you know, it would hurt to think of anyone who's just abandoned, which kind of felt like what Kay was going to do. And ultimately didn't do because she stayed in the house, right? She said, I'm not going to leave her. And then my mom also quoted George Lopez in talking about, like, how, you know, Latina families don't drop off there. Like, you have them in your house. And I made that same joke when we were watching, and that I was like, we don't drop our families off. Like, you have, like, your paternal and maternal grandparents in this house, like, living with you, sharing your room as a kid, which is, like, an ethnic thing, too. Like, you know, I know some Asian families who do that. There's Latin families who do that, Black families. Like, it's just, so I was just like, white people out here. But I do think, like, you know, I hope that, like, a film like this allows people to see the importance of being there and being patient and offering yourself as that point and anchor for someone who's going through that, and that it is very hard to reconcile that you're this person with who you knew, because that is ultimately the thing that it is, right? Is that they've changed, they're different now. I've had to, you know, face that before. It was more instant than that. Like, it was like, oh, this person's different now. But with this kind of gradual process of, like, slowly seeing a person that you love become someone else, or just stressfully losing who they were, it can be really horrifying. And so I do hope that, you know, you can, if you are a caregiver, you know, a caregiver, to one, give them care, because that is a lot of emotional labor, and to find some moments of joy. One of the things that my mother would do to just bring him happiness would be to put on old music, and he would just dance with my grandmother, like, in the living room, which is the sweetest thing. I was like, oh my God, that's so sweet. Sometimes they let him watch TV, but he would sometimes think that the Cowboys were in the living room. Or if there was, like, a fire on TV, he would think it was real. And so, like, eventually TV kind of became, like, a no. So it was like, no, but music, and you dance. They would play games with him. You know, with my younger sister played a lot with him and would, like, go and just hang out with him. And I think that was a piece of joy for him towards the end. So if there's anything you can take, you know, from this film and this episode, is, like, be that for that person. You know, find that point of joy and offer it to them.
Yeah. And I think there's, like, a lot to be said in terms of, you know, it's hard when you see the person who used to take care of you become someone you need to take care of, and that can be a stressful experience because you're used to that person being, like, one, the person who's your caretaker from when you were a kid, but then also, like, there, as Edna was, she was very strong-willed. She was like, I do not need help. I need you to back up, and I'm like my own person. I'm autonomous in what I'm doing, and that's, like, not yours to take away. And I think there are instances, especially in American culture, where, in, like, whiteness and capitalism and all that stuff, where it is very much like, we're going to put you in a place and that's where you're going to be now. And it's a means of capitalism in addition to this, like, I don't know, it's kind of cruel in that, like, before they're even at the point where they would need this kind of, like, care, they're like, we do not want to take care of you. You need to go because it is inconvenient to me to put my life on hold to do that. And I feel like that does happen.
3 jobs because capitalism, and minimum wage isn't a livable wage. And so it's like, you can't even, like, there are both instances ends where you're like, I can't help you, and that kills me.
Yeah. And it's very real. It's another instance where capitalism really makes being a human very difficult, and really, like, kind of takes a lot of the power away from these kinds of decisions in terms of, like, there's people, and if you think of childcare and adult care, like, it's very much like you need to have the financial means to fund these things. And if you do not, then that makes these decisions a lot harder. And also can, like, push your hand, as you said, like, if you're working 3 jobs and you cannot take off to help your loved one, it's a non-starter, and you just kind of have to live with that, and that's really hard too.